Bryan Houston here for Rattle and Hum Sports, and with me an old friend of mine, and he's 300 years old. He's covered high school football around here since before there were face masks. David Smoak from ESPN Central Texas, 1660. You used to come to this thing all the time and cover it as the Big 12 in general. Now you're Baylor specific. How much of a difference is it in the way you cover Big 12 media days now?
Well, we're here. We can get Baylor anytime. The reason we're here today is we'll get them, but mainly because we can get Bill Snyder, or we can get Gary Patterson, Bob Bowlesby, and the access is, since we're here, the access is going to be good. So we're here to really get the other schools that it would, we can get them at times, but we get them all at once, and it works out well for us. We'll be here for a couple of days, fly to L.A. tonight, cover Cowboys camp. So,
quit bragging.
Yeah, no, I mean somebody's got to do this job. You've done it. You know what I'm talking about. Well, like, for example, yesterday we had Bill Snyder, but it's not just about what he says about K-State. We had Bill Snyder talking about John Hubert. They're really good at running back, who is from Midway High School, right there in the Waco area. So we turn that in, and that's the way I've always done my philosophy, is take something regional or national, and how does it affect local? And so it's good. Today, great day today with Stoops and Mac Brown, Art Browse, the Baylor guys, and David Ash, quarterback at Texas from Belton in our backyard. And so I would rather come out of today with David Ash than Mac Brown. We've had Mac Brown. We've had him on 4 or 5 times in the last 3 or 4 years. So I would rather, that's when I'm rather would get him than I'd get Mac Brown today. If we get both, that's fantastic.
What after the first day, what would you say were the big stories? Were there any big stories that came out of yesterday?
Well, Bob Bowlesby, who's sitting right over there talking to a station in Dallas, I think in a Stanford-esque way, in a way that was not look at me and pulpit, I think he blasted the NCAA. I think he said they need to get their blank together. I think that basically no one trusts them anymore. The NCAA was someone we could always disagree with, or we could always be frustrated by decisions, especially if, for example, you're a fan of Team X or University X and they got hit with probation or whatever. Even if you got a wrist slap, you're going to complain about it instead of going, damn, I'm kind of lucky we got that. But to me, he made the point now, it's not about whether you disagree with them. It's about, do you trust them? And if we can't have trust, then what can we have? That's supposed to be the governing body of the NCAA. And if most of their schools, Division III or Division I, if most of the schools don't trust them, what value do they have? It's almost like, and I'll use an example, and I don't want to get in politics or not, but you know what happened lately with the IRS and the fact that there was maybe some targeting or profiling, whatever you want to call it, is that everyone is scared of the IRS, and probably nobody really likes them, but it's a necessary evil. But if you start to not trust them, then you have a problem. I think people probably still trust them. In the case of the NCAA, I'm not so sure anybody right now trusts their leadership. Mark Emmert was supposed to come in, and he was supposed to sit there and bring a trust to that place. He's supposed to do a lot of things. I think right now they're worse than when he arrived. And I'm not saying he hasn't made good decisions. My point, though, is this, is that has he made decisions that make sense? And until they get trust, I think the NCAA's got to stop investigating everybody. We know what happened with Miami. We've known what happened with other places. I'm wondering do they even need to do they need to get out of the investigation business and get into just somehow gain the trust back?
You just mentioned it. I mean, if these guys can't be trusted and yet they're throwing down penalties against schools, I mean, there's a major conflict of interest in that.
Oh my gosh. I mean, they have been a cluster. I mean, what they've done to almost ruin their case against Miami with the Shapiro guy, and leaking and all that. And I mean, if the White House has leaks, then everyone does, But at the same time, they had this case that was closed, shut, and done. And they screwed that up. And I'm not so sure they've handled, even though Penn State was as bad of anything you could ever have, I'm still not so sure they handled that well. And then you sit there and you see what Oregon's going through, and you see what the allegations are with them.
And nothing happened.
Well, and basically it seems like it was, it's almost as if some schools can say, okay, we're going to be accountable for what we did. We're going to reprimand ourselves. And in some cases, the NCAA goes, nice job, at least you tried, we'll pat you on the butt. Some of the schools can do the exact same thing and be off TV for 2 years. or they can be, lose 20 scholarships. And I think that it's almost a selective decision making. And I've always had this, and I know the NCAA hates to hear this, but I've always had this. There are certain schools that no matter what they do, will never be hammered the way SMU was hammered. No way. And it's almost, if you look at the history, the private schools have been hit harder than sometimes the ones who have 35 to 50,000 enrollment that are public schools. The
TV money's too big now.
It is, and so, but you can't let that affect your decision making. If this breaking of whatever rules or whatever they've done at university, if it's that, and then that means that they're off TV for 2 years, you know what? The NCAA has how many 113 Division 1A schools or whatever they call it these days? FBS. I get them all mixed up. It's like alphabet soup. It's like heavyweight championships. There's used to be the WBC and the WBA, and now there's 9 or 10 others. And now we want to know why we don't know who the heavyweight champion is. But if one school, I don't care if it's Texas or Oklahoma, or if it's Florida or Ohio State. If one school is that powerful that it hurts their television for 1 or 2 years, then they've done a bad job of helping everyone else get stronger.
Let's talk about the Big 12. Obviously, you've heard all the talk all summer long. Bob Stoops ripping the SEC for being overhyped, the Big 12 for being underrated. Yet you look this year, and you're not going to have a team in the top 10 in the Big 12 in the preseason. But you've got so much balance that you've got 6 schools that have first-place votes in this thing. How strong is the conference? Is there a team in this conference that could challenge for a national championship, or is it just going to be a bunch of okay football teams beating up on each other this year?
That's a great point. I mean, I remember at one point when the SEC could not win the games that they now win before. I remember the Big 12 or even before that, the Big 8 used to beat up on the SEC most of the time in the big bowl games. So it's cyclical. But right now, there's no doubt. I mean, the SEC has a stranglehold. What is it, 7 consecutive national titles? That's almost ridiculous. So that's the Big 12. Someone will come out of it. And I'll tell you what, I don't care if it looks like now or not if there's a top 10 team, but let's just say somebody gets hot. Let's say somebody that somehow, I don't care who it is, somehow runs the table. At the end of the year, they'll play for the national title. Now, whether anyone can, I don't think right now you look at there's an elite team. I don't think you see a team that you look at like you do Alabama. Or I don't think you see that. But I do think that because of the way the conference is set up, if somebody runs the table, they'll play no matter what else, no matter what the SEC does, no matter what the Pac-12 does or the Big Ten or the ACC, you run the table because it's deep. It is deep. Now, there's also, who's Kansas, who's Iowa State, what's West Virginia going to do the second year, and all that. But I'd rather have national titles. I would rather have BCS championships. At the end of the year, A&M last year turned out to be a very solid top 10 team going into the SEC. And so someone's capable of doing that. The year Oklahoma won it in 2000, I think it was, they weren't even ranked in the top 25, I don't think, that year. If they were, it was like 23 or 24. So somebody can do that.
Do you see a Kansas State that kind of came out of nowhere to challenge last year?
Well, they had that quarterback, and they were probably going to be pretty good anyway. And I mean, Bill Snyder, he's just amazing. I love talking to Bill Snyder. He just kind of like sitting down on my uncle's lap, and talking about Bill Snyder. But
I bet that made him uncomfortable, though.
He was like, you don't have to sit in my lap. We just wanted to have a chat here. I would say, I still think that there are teams, a TCU, an Oklahoma State, even a Baylor, obviously Texas and OU because of their pedigree, although lately, of course, everyone talks about OU was terrible and A&M just crushed them. But they were 10-3, and, they lost to Notre Dame, who played for the national title. They lost to Texas A&M, who probably was good as anybody last year at the end of the year and had beaten Alabama. And then I forgot who the other loss was. But, I mean, they were still good. It's just that their standard is different. Then there's those 10 or 12 schools. Your favorite school, LSU, even mine, that's not quite as good as it used to be. In fact, they're not even near it. There's a standard at, like Nebraska and Oklahoma and other places that 10-3 sounds good, but it's really not acceptable in many ways. And it's probably unfair that we feel that way.
Does 10-3 at Oklahoma mean the program is going stale?
No, I think what's happened here is that he won so early. I mean, Stoops won in his second year, and it was shocking. That year was shocking. I mean, no one even knew who Josh Heupel was. He came out of a JUCO, and everything just hit. And then they had that run of about 4 to 5 years where they beat the hell out of Texas for 5 consecutive years, and they played for some titles. They lost that game. The LSU game was a physical game. LSU was better. The game against Florida when they had Tebow, it was a physical game. Florida was just a little bit better. Again, that's the SEC difference. The one they got embarrassed by USC, a lot comes out of that because of the fact they shouldn't have been in that game because Kansas State had beaten them in the Big 12 championship game. No, I think that they're fine. I tell you what, this is a personal thing. There was a time when Nebraska could not win the national title. They won in the 70-71 season, and then they went a long time until 94 until they won again. But they were always 9-3, 10-2, 11-1. 12-1. They knocked on the door. They couldn't beat it down. Bobby Bowden at Florida State couldn't beat it down. And then all of a sudden, they won it, and they had this incredible run. And then they went through a little bit of a funk about 10 years ago. In fact, it was about 10 years ago when Callahan showed up. And then you start wishing, man, I wish I could go 9-3, 10-3. So for Oklahoma, I think it's all. We are such a win now. And we're such an immediate information now society. We don't break down games anymore, Brian. We break down plays. We don't break down results. We break down 1st and 10. The Twitter world, the social media world's changed the way we look at everything.
Is Texas stale?
Well, they have been. There's no doubt, and Max admitted it. And I think Mac also responds a lot to what maybe the public is saying to kind of cool down certain things. Like all of a sudden they have their own personnel department following Alabama's lead. There was a time when Texas used to be the one that began that. I said that on the radio about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I had a UT fan call me up and go, my God, you're right. They used to be the ones that were the trendsetters. Now they're following other leads, whether it's the pick-me-up offense or whether it's this or that. Remember, they went through that change after McCoy, and they went to the running game. They almost like, we're going to force a square into a circle. You have to be who you are. You can't respond to what other people are doing.
That's the question. What is Texas' identity now?
Well, I thought it was going to be when they went to this, they have all these blue-chip running backs, and really, how many of them really are effective? Now, who knows what happens to Gray this year or Malcolm Brown this year or others they have this year. I still think now during the Vince Young and Colt McCoy, they ran the spread, they ran the zone read. They could do that with those two guys. I mean, you could run anything with Vince Young. You could play Nerf football with him and win. And McCoy was very good and effective as well. My thought on their identity is that they should, in my opinion, should be a play action, pound the football, ball control. They're set up as much to do that as anybody else except Kansas State, I think, in the Big 12, if you look at it. Because everyone else is like throw gas on your hair and light a match. And I think Texas
500 plays in a game.
Yeah, and I think Texas, they worked for 2-3 years with the recruiting to get to this power running game, and then all of a sudden it didn't work. You can't do that. That's like changing defensive or offensive coordinators in the NFL 2 or 3 times in 2 or 3 systems. You can't do that. It doesn't work that way. Maybe now with so many players back, they lose their offensive coordinator in Harsin. That's okay. Applewhite takes over. We'll see what happens. You know what? I don't know what their identity is, and that answers your question. We knew there used to be play really good defense, great speed on defense, and run the zone read, and they didn't throw the ball a lot, but they threw it effectively. Now, I don't know what their identity is. I don't know if they know what their identity is. I know that they are saying what it is, but I don't think really we won't know until they start to kick it off.
And then as far as Baylor's concerned, again, when Grant Taft retired, we thought the glory days may end forever, and now Art Briles has done what people thought was impossible. He's got them back in the topic now. How good are they going to be this year?
Well, they are definitely a part of every discussion. I mean, they really have to be. And their schedule early on, now there's a couple of games, and you know how things are. We never know. After Appalachian State, you never know what can happen with anybody when they beat Michigan, and there's a couple of other teams that, you can't take anything for granted. There's the days of thinking, that's a 50-0 game. Those are even over. I mean, really, it doesn't matter. Well, we know what their identity is, but people almost in some cases misunderstand it. It's a wide open, get as many plays in, don't stop offense. But you know what? They can run the hell out of the football. And with Glasgow Martin coming off the ankle injury, he can pound it. You got Lake Seastrunk, who was fantastic last year. Once they got him in the games about midseason against Texas. And their defense, as bad as it was, and it was horrible, their defense at the end of the year, something clicked. They got their safety back, who was the senior. They got a couple other players healthy. They moved a couple of guys around. They had a couple of young defensive linemen that started to get more playing time that became disruptive. And what they did to UCLA was frightening, because UCLA has always been known, whether they're soft or not, they have great speed. Baylor was faster than UCLA. Art Briles has recruited basically track athletes that are football players who run track, not the other way around. And they could run. I mean, Ganaway ran for a school record amount of yards. Jay Finley, who went to the Bengals, he ran for a bunch of yards. And now you've got two of these guys back. And I'm telling you, they can, if you really look at their stats, as flash and dash as they can be, they are a team that can get physical in the running game that a lot of people, it's kind of like Oregon. Mm-hmm. Oregon is a team known for wide open, all these guys, they run you, but they really are a running football team that can throw it. But if the bottom line would be, everything comes down to this. They got the new quarterback in Bryce Petty, was recruited by Tennessee. When Kiffin got there, he said he didn't want him, so Baylor got him. It's a great deal for them. He's taken he's thrown 15 passes. I don't even know if it's that much. I think he's going to be fine. If Art Briles says you're going to be a pretty good quarterback, don't you trust him?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, it's kind of like if Miles says you're a pretty good linebacker or defensive end, if Saban thinks you're a good offensive lineman, then I think you're probably
trust him.
good. Yeah.
Mr. Smoak, always a pleasure, man.
Thank you. Hey, when you talked about after Grant Tapp left, and you're right. They had 16. They had a couple other coaches, 3 or 4, I think they went, but they had a 16-year drought. The entirety of the Big 12 where they didn't go to a bowl game. Now, it's all relative to each program. The first year in 2010, they beat Kansas State. It was like they won the national championship. They became bowl eligible. Then they lost the bowl game. Then they won one. And now all of a sudden they put 3 together. That's really not even Grant Tapp did that. As more consistent as he was kind of like what Tech and Spike Dykes were. They would have a good team, then they'd take a step back and have 2 or 3 and then take a step back. What Baylor may be doing, if they can kind of string together another year or two, could they now have the kind of run that Tech had with Mike Leach? Could that be the kind of consistency that they have? Because you know what? You could say that what you want. They had Nebraska, Oklahoma, and Texas, and Kansas State was good, but nobody had been bowl eligible every year of the conference until 2 years ago, like Tech. And maybe that's what they're about to put together. It'd be nice.
It'll be fun. Mr. Smoak, always good talking to you, man.
Great to see you, Brian.
David Smoak, I'm Bryan Houston for Rattle and Hum Sports.